TPCSI fans, you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all your sports books and track all your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You could also sign up for sports books and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as it's the best account on the platform. Head to App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire and download the app.
Excuse me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is the Midday Market Report with good friend, colleague. I hope to see him hopefully in August, trying to sneak out the first week in July for the main event for the World Series of Poker, but we'll talk later about that. Sean Alvarez at Smooth Turn 2 and WagerTalk. We're talking the Belmont Stakes. Already the third wheel in the Triple Crown. No Triple Crown again this year, but we're going to talk a little about the Derby. He's going to break down what happened at the Preakness, and of course, we're going to get into the Belmont Stakes here back east. First and foremost, shout out to our proud sponsor and partnership, WagerWire. If you have not downloaded the app, head on over to Google Play, download it. It's free. I promise myself, Travis, and Zach will take care of the rest of this, not just today, tomorrow, next week, next month, through 2024, and a long time after. So shout out to our producer, Mr. Noah Frank. As always, amazing work here. Thank you so much for your hard work here. Without further ado, the star of this show, the one and only Mr. Sean Alvarez. What is up, Sean?
Not a whole lot. I mean, it's all like I always say, when I get to chat with you, Jeff, it's always fun chatting because it's always, really good, reputable horse race. And even more so, I'm sorry for those that hold Belmont Park near and dear to their heart. I love the fact that we're running at Saratoga, not only for the Belmont, but it's Thursday through Sunday of basically Saratoga type racing. And those are some of the best races in the summer, best races of the year. And we get one extra week this year.
Well, I have said now, this is, I think, our third year of bringing you on through the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont. And I think 2 years ago, we actually had you on for a little of the Breeders' Cup. This year, I'm hoping, praying, that we might get you on a few times for the Saratoga meet and the summer races. And then, of course, the Breeders' Cup. Okay, we're at the third leg here. Kentucky Derby. Take us back, 6 weeks ago to the Kentucky Derby. The favorite goes down. A good race. The winner was
Mystic Dan. Great race. They were cooking up front, and he wasn't necessarily in touch with those leaders. Running those I call it quote unquote suicide type fractions, going as quick as they were for such a big race. But he was up, somewhat near the lead, and Brian Hernandez did a great job by just saving ground and scraping paint. And lucky for him, he didn't have to squeeze by or try to swing out wide, because swinging out wide was not happening with the amount of horses that had him pinned in. But the sea kind of parted for him at the rail, and he had basically kind of a 2-length type of gap in between there, and he had the first jump on the horses that we liked, and in Sierra Leone and Forever Young and Catching Freedom. Those are 3 horses that I thought actually ran a better race than Mystic Dan. But when you save all the ground in a 20-horse field, sometimes that's the winning factor, and it looked like that was definitely the winning factor in the Kentucky Derby this year.
And because of that race, Forever Young, the Japanese horse, who was 5 for 5 in 5 different tracks, goes back to Japan. And the horse that was talked about leading up, I thought, to the Kentucky Derby, the most fierceness, decided, hey, we're going to take a step back and we're going to bypass the Preakness. So the Preakness ran 3 weeks ago, and give us exactly. And you had talked about Mystic Dan, but what you had really talked about was keep an eye on the weather. Is it going to be a muck, a slop fest, or is it going to be okay? What'd you see at the Preakness?
Yeah, it was definitely keep an eye on the weather because there was just a lot of different storms. I don't know if it was different storms or the same storms, but they were just moving in and out kind of all day. So that was definitely the key thing of keep an eye on the weather. But we alluded to it last year with National Treasure, and we alluded to it this year again. We just didn't have the right horse. Keep an eye on that pace. Let's see if they walk the dog up front. Let's see how quick they go. We were hoping for a little bit quicker of a pace with the Baffert Francadatoria horse from the outside, but Seize the Gray and Torres just broke sharp from the gate, just kind of collected the lead on their own. It didn't necessarily run out very quickly for it, rattled off the half mile time in 47-2, but he did it with a 2-length lead. When I can't remember the trainer, but there was a trainer that had an interview years ago that said, it doesn't really matter how fast my filly goes. All it depends on is how comfortable she is. Meaning, is anybody up there pressing her for the lead? In this case, the Colt, Seize the Gray. Nobody was pressing Seize the Gray for the lead. He had a legit 2-length lead going around the entire race, going workout type fractions. I mean, he came home in 112, turning from home, and didn't really necessarily kick on. But we talked about Mystic Dan making a turn from home. Granted, he was trying to, collect a horse that was walking on the lead with a 2-length lead, but he just doesn't have that kind of closing kick to go out and run those horses down, which again, I believe we talked about last week or 3 weeks ago. So, unfortunately, we didn't have Seize the Gray. For me, it was kind of a boring race. I know when they flashed up the 47-3, I kind of turned around at Circa and just basically, dusted off my tickets because they were done. I didn't have Seize the Gray, and unless he just spit the bit out or the jockey fell off, he was winning that race about a half mile in. So that was the sum of the Preakness for me.
Well, and it's so funny. I grew up at the dog track, okay, and then the dog track for my local one, or if I was doing, later on in the afternoon or evening, some, others from across the country, I knew exactly, each race. I knew, what to expect, who was going to go to the lead, who was going to be hanging around, and then if there was a closer, who would that be? And in dog racing, so much of the time when you need a dog to hit the lid, see the rabbit, and go to the lead. If they don't get the lead, or they get blown up trying to go from outside to the rail and they get their legs taken out, you just take the tickets and you throw them up in the air and you're already turning the page for the next race. There's nothing you can do. For you as the horse expert, when you see times like that, and you spent hours upon hours, days upon days breaking this race down, it's got to be a helpless feeling like, shit, we're done.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to it with the weather. The weather being a muddy, sealed track at Pimlico, that's not going to help closers anyways. First off, they don't necessarily like dirt in their face. They definitely don't like mud clumps thrown in their face, as well as the jockeys. But it generally plays towards those front running horses. And like we said, at least last year we had National Treasure on, the defensive side just in case that happened. But unfortunately, I didn't see Seize the Gray as setting the pace with at least other pace type horses in that race. And yeah, like you said, it's, I've seen this story before. I know the ending. Where's the exit, type of thing.
All right. Tomorrow, I think coverage starts at 6:00 post time. I assume around 6:20, 6:30, something like that. Belmont Stakes at Saratoga. If you've never been to Saratoga, get your ass there. It is amazing. Spend the weekend up there. Have some fun. Big field. I should say a decent side, not the 19 horses from the Kentucky Derby. Looking at the field, and I know nothing, but I do know this. This is the longest of the 3 races. I've always been a closer. I like the longer races. I'm the guy that had Thunder Gulch in that amazing way back Kentucky Derby race. I'm the guy that was a Corey Nakatani fan because he could take a mule down the stretch and find a way to get to the wire. You got the stage, you got the analysis. Why don't you do us a big favor and break down the horses for us? Give us a few cents on each, and then we'll get down to the outrights.
Yeah, so first, just a little small correction. Yes, you're right. The Belmont is the longest race of the Triple Crown races, but since they're running up at Saratoga, they would have to run, if they ran at a mile and a half, they would have to have the starting gate legitimately in the middle of the turn. So we're cutting back to a mile and a quarter, same distance as the Kentucky Derby. So the Belmont Stakes this year and the Belmont Stakes next year are both going to be running that mile and a quarter. But also, kind of just to allude to what you kind of mentioned about, Nakatani and closers in the Belmont with the distance, is it's actually kind of I wouldn't say a myth or a wise tale, but a lot of the public bettors think the longer the distance, the more it's going to play for the closers. And actually, I know I did the research a few years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago, so I don't know how much it holds up, but actually the front runners or mid-pack horses actually win the Belmont at a mile and a half a little bit more often than it would closers. So not necessarily enough to say closers don't have a chance, but Belmont in years past in the history leans a little bit more towards front running horses. But yeah, so just to stop rambling about the Belmont, let's get after this field. So we start with the 1, Seize the Gray, the Preakness defending Preakness champion. Kind of alluded to what or how he won the race in the Preakness. So won't talk necessarily about that as much more here. But Mystic Dan's the only horse that is making his third start in the Triple Crown. He ran in the Kentucky Derby, he ran in the Preakness, and now he's going to run in the Belmont on Saturday. Well, Seize the Gray didn't run in the Kentucky Derby, but Seize the Gray ran in the Kentucky Derby undercard. So he has the exact same rest time as Mystic Dan. He's basically run on all 3 Triple Crown days, just not Triple Crown races. And if you look back at that race, the Pat Day Mile at Churchill on that undercard for the Derby, you wanted to be close and up near the lead. It was definitely playing quick and fast. So the closers weren't necessarily making up the ground that we would come to expect those type of closers to make. And Torres and D. Wayne Lucas figured that out early and was definitely closer to very quick fractions. They went 22-1, 44-3, going a flat mile on a 1-turn mile, and that's really quick fractions and definitely closer than Torres normally would want to be. But with the way the track was playing and the way Seize the Gray was just ready to run that day, is he just kind of ran away from that field and won by a mile and a quarter, kind of geared down. So those are 2 pretty impressive efforts. While I don't like the way that he ran in the Preakness because I wanted a better outcome, you can't knock a horse for doing what he was asked, and he did what he was asked. He won the Preakness by 2 1/4 lengths. But here's the thing: he wasn't targeted in the Pat Day Mile. He wasn't targeted in the Preakness. He was both about 9.5 to 1 in both those races. Now you're defending champion of the Preakness. We've seen what you can do up front. He gets the rail. I think he's going to have a little bit more of a target on his back. I think there's other pace in this race, and I just don't see him working out the trip of being able to take back, settle, and then be able to sweep out wide and win this Belmont Stakes race. So I do like the horse a little bit underneath, but I'm going to play against him on up top as far as the win ends go. Number 2, Resilience at 10-1. This is an interesting horse because he ran a really good Wood Memorial race back 2 starts back at Aqueduct, and that's not necessarily a good springboard for the Kentucky Derby. But he was kind of more of that, I wouldn't say wise guy horse, but there was a lot of rumblings around, people that have sharp opinions in the Kentucky Derby. And while he was 30-1, I think there was a lot of people that kind of hung their hat on what Resilience was going to do. And he made a great middle move running into those fast fractions, but, it was just a little bit too much too early. And he just, didn't have enough in the tank when you're making that middle move as early as he did. It just kind of went backwards, not necessarily backwards, but, we talked about it. Mystic Dan saved all the ground, rode the rail, went by him. Sierra Leone and Forever Young were flying at the end. So I thought it was a really good, respectable 6th place in the Kentucky Derby. And Source is training well again, Junior Alvarado sticks aboard, so he knows the mistake, necessarily that Resilience and Junior made going too early in that Kentucky Derby. So I think we're going to see Junior sit back a little bit more. He doesn't need a lot of pace to run into. So this is definitely one that is a little bit more on the dangerous end, on the win end than what I like in the 1 Seize the Gray. The 3 Mystic Dan, your Kentucky Derby champion, kind of harped on what he's done in all, basically the last 2 races. He saved all the ground in the Kentucky Derby. That was the deciding factor. Even with that ground saved, if Sierra Leone and Forever Young weren't hand fighting the entire way through the stretch, I just don't see. I think Mystic Dan actually comes in a good 3rd place in that race. So the bumping around by those 2 horses cost them the win. And in the Preakness, granted he had a little bit of ground to make up with Seize the Gray, kind of just going out and doing what he was doing on the front end. But I wouldn't say he didn't have any excuses, but he was coming. He was out in the clear. He doesn't have that closing kick. He does have more of a grinding type stretch run, but he doesn't have that closing kick to put horses away. And you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier with the field of this race. Instead of having just one dominant horse or at least 2, a 2-horse race, this is a little bit more of a competitive field that we've seen in previous Belmont years. So I'm not necessarily loving Mystic Dan's chances. I think you're for the price that you're going to have to swallow. Granted, he's the Kentucky Derby champion. I just like other horses in this race. The number 4 Wine Steward, I don't love this horse, that much. He is going to be a little bit more of a pace presence, just in case somebody goes out there and wants to go out by themselves. He's not going to. Manny Franco's not going to let a horse get too far ahead of this horse. But neither one of his races were all that impressive. He had. I'll go back to it. In this case, he really had no excuses in either one of those races. And neither one of the times he could put away horses. One of them was, he couldn't make the lead in the Grade 3 Lexington. And last time out, Antiquarian was outside of him, and he made the lead and just couldn't put him away. So I don't necessarily think that, excuse me, I don't necessarily think that this horse can step up to be, I would say, even in my exacta. I would like Luis Saez to be in the reins necessarily instead of Manny Franco, but I'm going to toss the Wine Steward. I'm going to let that one beat me. And the number 5 Antiquarian, well, obviously winning the Grade 3 Peter Pan is impressive. Again, he had all the race his own way. He was 3 wide throughout the race. Nobody in his way. Johnny V just basically got to push the button whenever he wanted. And he only went by the Wine Steward. I just said, I don't really like the Wine Steward. I'll let that horse beat me. He had the races entirely his own way, and it took until the last 100 yards to go by the Wine Steward. So if I'm going to let the Wine Steward beat me, I don't necessarily see much in the 5 Antiquarian that I would like to play in that spot either. So the 6 Dornoch, we talked about this in the Derby when he drew the rail. This is a speed type horse that wants the lead. He wants to control things. And when you get the rail in a 20-horse field, it's basically a death sentence. And that was basically what happened. He was shuffled back. He was checked a few times. He didn't like anything about that race. Kind of a similar race to what happened in 2 starts back in the Kentucky Bluegrass at Keeneland. He was inside. He didn't like to be inside. He was throwing his head about, couldn't get out of there. And if you look at his races 5, his 5 races, 5 starts races back. I'm just gonna leave it be. I think you guys know what I'm getting at. I can't figure out how to say that, but this horse wants to be on the lead, and he's got a ton of early speed. So I think this is the horse that we're going to see gun from the gate. You've got a very aggressive Luis Saez in the reins. He loves to jump from the gate. So I think this is the horse that we're going to see on the front end. But like I've said, with other horses wanting to be up or at least near the lead, I don't necessarily think that we're going to see him, walk the dog like we saw Seize the Gray do. So the 7 Protective, the longest shot in the field at 20-1. You'd think I have nothing good to say about this horse, but his last two starts were actually a lot better on film than they looked on paper. He was way too far back in the Wood Memorial 2 starts back, but he came running into very slow fractions. Didn't have necessarily the pace that he wanted to run into, but he came on really well. Didn't necessarily have to sweep out wide. He was doing it behind horses, passing horses on the inside. It was just a really good kind of gutsy effort that I like to see in races from horses like that. And kind of a similar race. This one was coming out of the Peter Pan, which I kind of alluded to with two horses, talking about two horses previously. It's not necessarily a strong race to come out of, but again, he was a little bit further back, didn't really like what was going on up in front, and tried to kind of go through a hole and just got shut off. But instead of throwing in the towel and spitting the bit out, he kind of re-rallied and came on. So again, I really like a horse that fights. He's going to be a little bit further back. If we get a little bit of a hotter pace up front, I think Tyler in the 7 protective can definitely come running. And, I'll touch on it a little bit later with the 9 Sierra Leone. Chad Brown took Tyler Gaffleone off of Sierra Leone because he was upset about a few decisions that he made in the turn. Now Tyler Gaffleone gets a closer like Sierra Leone. I don't know. Maybe we see a little bit of a chippy effort, a little bit of a, chip on his shoulder to, I wouldn't necessarily say do anything dirty to Sierra Leone, but wouldn't it be great to be taken off the 9-5 favorite and then win on the longest shot in the field? Just kind of as a you shouldn't have taken me off the horse. The 8 Honor Marie is an interesting horse for me. You could basically cross out his Kentucky Derby race. He was just way too far back. Didn't want to be up and near that pace. And when he did get running, he ran into basically the slower horses coming back to him. So not really a lot that you can take out of that race, not a lot that you can knock on him, but he ran a really good Louisiana Derby, and he ran such a good Louisiana Derby 2 starts back. This was the wise guy horse. This was, the horse that everybody was talking about leading up to the Kentucky Derby. Wound up going off at 15-1, which are respectable odds for, that 20 horse field. And, he's again working out really well, getting ready for this race. But again, what Honor Marie are we going to see? Are we going to see a horse that can jump well and not miss the break? Because he does tend to find trouble. So while he does find a lot of trouble, I don't necessarily think that I'm going to be playing him on the win end. But again, if this is the Honor Marie that runs well like he did in the Louisiana Derby, I don't think this is a horse that you want to get beat on the underneath side. Now we'll jump to basically basically the two favorites in this race. The 9 Sierra Leone at 9-5. I talked about it. Chad Brown took Tyler Gaffleone off this horse. Apparently the plan was Tyler was supposed to have the whip in the left hand going into the turn in the Kentucky Derby. And I don't necessarily know if that makes that much of a difference, because if you look at the races 2 starts back before the Kentucky Derby, both times Tyler was going to the stick with his left hand, which he's trying to get this horse to straighten up and at least not lug in. In all 3 of the races, the Risen Star, the Bluegrass, the Kentucky Derby, he's lugged in, and he's lugged in a lot. And we saw basically what happened with when he was kind of hand fighting with Forever Young and bumping around. It basically cost him the Kentucky Derby, whether that was Forever Young's Kentucky Derby, whether that was Sierra Leone's Kentucky Derby. Unfortunately, we won't know because they were bumping around in the stretch. But this is a horse that, he's going to come from back. He's going to come with a big late kick, but he kind of showed it in his maiden special weight race in his first time out. He doesn't need to be that far back. And he also showed it in the Risen Star, where he doesn't need that much pace to run into. And I've talked about it in other shows, in other previous years, previous weeks. You take Tyler Gaffleone off and you get Flavien Prat. So he's legitimately who I think is the best jockey in the country. I love what he can do with horses and the way he can get them to settle. So I'm not necessarily saying it's a great move to take Tyler off, but if you're going to take Tyler off, I think it's definitely a good call to go to Flavien Prat. Not necessarily a good sign for bettors that want to beat the chalk, but let's look at the 10 mind frame. And Jeff, you kind of alluded to it in a DM earlier this week. This is going to be the buzz horse. This is, He's 2 for 2. He's a late bloomer. Didn't start racing until March of this year, but he's done it in impressive fashion. They went way too quick, way too early in his maiden special weight first start of his career. And Irad got him to sit back and settle, and it was just a push of the button. He ran by him like the other horses were standing still and went on to win by 13 lengths. But what I really like coming out of that race is not necessarily how he did it, but I love the fact that the second place horse came back and won next start out. So not only do you get the highest Beyer speed figure, his maiden special weight speed figure is higher than Sierra Leone's second place Kentucky Derby finish. It's higher than Mystic Dan's first place Kentucky Derby finish. So I don't hang my hat a lot on Beyer speed figures, but that's definitely impressive. And all he did when coming back on the 4th of May at Churchill was kind of stamp his form and what he did. Nobody wanted to go to the lead. They were too afraid of what he would do if he sat off the lead. So Irad and Mindframe just went on and set the pace and ran on and won by 7.5 lengths. So, I've talked about it. I've talked about it. People have talked about it. We've all seen it in horses, really good horses in years past. It's not necessarily, how fast they're running, but how easily it looks like they're doing it. And Mindframe just looks like he has a very high cruising speed. And if he gets the pace to run into with Dornoch and sees the gray up front, I think him and Irad can sit off and kind of a push the button, see if he's good enough here in the Belmont Stakes.
A lot to chew on there. And you're right. A couple days ago, I sent the DM to you, and obviously Sierra Leone. When you add Pratt, and I'm thinking of my good friend Kenny Magner. If you're watching and listening, hello Kenny. I know he's a big Pratt guy. Now you take Pratt and you add, Sierra Leone, and it looks like a recipe for success. Now here comes the 10 mindset. You're getting more meat on the bone. You're talking about Beyer's speed. I assume the 9-10 will be the most pressed exacta button. That would be my guess.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And there's nothing really to knock about Sierra Leone. So I don't necessarily think you're going to get the 9-5 on Sierra Leone. I could see Sierra Leone and Flavian going off at maybe even money. And I think 7-2 on Mindframe is a pipe dream. I think you're getting probably 2-1. 2-1, maybe 5-2 at last click, but I just think that this is going to be the buzz horse all week. We've seen what he can do. Those Beyer speed figures just kind of jump off the page for people that are speed figure type people. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think 9-10 exacta boxes. If it comes in, it's probably paying less than $2, so may not work out.
Before we get to your outright and your exacta here, set everyone up for the summer. I mean, I talked about Saratoga in the intro as we were getting ready to go. There are other big races to set up the stage, obviously for the Breeders' Cup, the first Saturday in November. So as an avid horse fan, set us up here how big this race is and kind of guide us to maybe where some of these horses will be going to get themselves hopefully set up for the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously going to all depend on how they come out of this race. Basically any good trainer is going to let the horse dictate when and where, not necessarily where, but when he wants to run, whether it be, through his feed stall or how he's moving on the track. So that's all going to be dependent on that. But you kind of touched on it. I think the two best meets of the year actually happened to, run at the same time in Del Mar and Saratoga. Whether you're a West Coast trainer or owner or an East Coast trainer or owner, as soon as you get in the game, you circle the dates of Saratoga and Del Mar. Everybody wants to be on the winner's circle there. So we're going to see a lot of good horses, good races at Saratoga and Del Mar. I know Del Mar's got the Pacific Classic, which is another classic race, winning you're in for the Belmont Stakes. And I know Saratoga's got a lot of winning you're in for the Belmont as well, not necessarily only the Classic, but sorry, did I say for the Belmont Stakes? For the Breeders' Cup Classic and all the other Breeders' Cup races. So yeah, the summer is, while we have the prep races to get ready for the Derby, not a lot in between. The summer is basically the prep. It's not even so much the prep. It's, they definitely hold, as much, notoriety as the Breeders' Cup on their own, but it's also just, gearing up for the Breeders' Cup, getting a spot in one of those races, and just kind of prepping towards it. So big prices, big fields, a lot of good racing, both tracks.
I have two, Jim Dandy and the Travers, right? Am I right?
Travers, Jim Dandy. I mean, it's basically every Saturday and Sunday there's stakes races at Saratoga.
All right, and that's where I'll be. My TV will be stuck on. One of the TVs will definitely be stuck on there. So a lot of people watching. So the stage is yours. Give us your breakdown, 1, 2, 3, and if you brought an exacta to the table.
Yeah, so I'm gonna jump on the Buzz horse, the hype horse. The number 10 Mind Frame is my top pick. What I really like about horses like this is, they can create their own trip. He can go out to the front. He can set the lead. He can do it his own way if need be, like we saw last time out at Churchill. Or he could sit off to a way too fast pace and just kind of a push the button and go. So if we see those type of efforts, that might just leave a little bit too much to be done for the 9 Sierra Leone and Flavian Pratt, who are my second choice. Yes, the lugging in is an issue, but again, we talked about it with Flavian Pratt taking over the mount, or the reins with this horse. I really like what he's doing. I even saw this morning that Chad Brown's changing the bit for Sierra Leone, so he's going to give Flavian Pratt a little bit more control over what Sierra Leone's head's doing, trying to get him to straighten out. So if Mind Frame doesn't get the I wouldn't say Mystic Dan trip, but the Mystic Dan type jump on the field. If he gets that first jump and puts out a 4 or 5 length type gap, that might leave a little bit too much for Sierra Leone to do. But I think this horse is going to come flying late. Hopefully Chad Brown's got it all worked out for him and Flavian Pratt. So I'm definitely not going to get beat by those two. So those are basically the only two that I'm playing on top. I'm going to let the other ones basically beat me. But if you want to go kind of into, my my 2 other picks, as far as my top 4 picks, I do like the 8 Honor Marie a little bit underneath. I really like the price. I love what he did in Louisiana Derby. I like the fact that Florent Giroux takes over the mount. Nothing bad to say about Ben Curtis, but Ben Curtis isn't Florent Giroux. So you get a little bit better of a jockey on, hopefully to steer Honor Marie out of trouble. Like I said, I like that 12-1. And usually I usually don't have much to say about the longest shot in the field, but I alluded to, I really like what the 7 Protective does in the stretch. Doesn't really give up. Kind of reminds me of what, I spoke about with Forever Young in the Kentucky Derby. It just has a knack for understanding what's asked about him and understanding what his job is. And again, we get a little bit of hopefully a chip on the shoulder with Tyler Gaffleone. So give me 20-1. There's holes to punch in other horses that are shorter prices. So I definitely like the 7 Protective to at least round out exactas or trifectas.
All right, so I assume your exacta will start 9-10 with.
Yeah, so 9-10. Again, like I said, I have holes to punch in other horses, and one of them's Mystic Dan at 5-1. That's not necessarily a horse that's going to help out if Sierra Leone comes in first. Mystic Dan is not necessarily going to help out that payout at 5-1. So going to play against Mystic Dan in this spot. I went 9-10 over 1, 2, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So again, we need Mind Frame or Sierra Leone to hopefully, at least start the exacta with a win on top. And then we've got some serious prices underneath with, Seize the Gray, Resilience, Honor Marie, and Protective that could really spice up the exacta if one of the other 2 favorites kind of falter in second.
And so that $1 punch would cost how much?
$10.
$10.
I've spent $10 worse elsewhere.
That doesn't even get you a good parking spot at Circa.
No. That's my tip for the bartender after Benson buys me a beer.
There you go. Scroll has been going the whole time, Sean. And before I throw it over to you to wrap this up, again, this stage is yours throughout the summer. If there's a card, it's a certain race that you want to pop on to talk about, the door is always open. So keep an eye and ear on any upcoming races or something that you want to just, come on for a few minutes to share the wealth to everyone. The door and the mic is yours.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You can head over to my page at WagerTalk. And yeah, I'll have, I already have my Belmont card up. You can get it for $10 off right now. So it's $25 for the entire full card. So all 14 races, not necessarily just the Belmont Stakes that we just went over. I'll also have my cards up for a cheaper price, a little bit, $15, but those are also full card selections, all races at Saratoga all week. And I will have that up for Saratoga and Del Mar during the summers as well. So head over to my page at WagerTalk, and hopefully we'll cash some winners together.
The one and only Sean Alvarez. Head on over to X at Smooth Turn 2. Follow him. Believe it or not, guys, he will actually follow you back. And if you ask him a question, 99.9% of the time, he'll actually answer that question too. And you can get all his work over at WagerTalk. So always a pleasure here. At 4:30-ish, the closing bell with Riley Magnuson and myself. We're going to get you caught up with I guess there's a game in the Boston Garden today or something. I don't know, tip off around 8. So from myself, Jeff Dawson at DC Sports Investor, Sean Alvarez, greatest producer in the land, Mr. Noah Frank, we thank you, and we will see you soon.